Good morning, everyone. I think everyone's just come in from the lobby, but welcome to today's forum. We'll just wait for everybody to come in and get access to the meeting. You can see some faces joining us. Welcome. All right. I think many people have managed to join us and are coming in from the lobby. Just wait to make sure everyone's had access. So just bear a moment with us. All right, good morning. I'm just waiting for the team to let me know that everybody's in from the lobby, and it looks like we are probably ready to go. So good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today for the public forum on the Essential Services Commission's draft decision on the 24-25 Victorian Default Offer. My name is Kate Simons. I'm the chairperson of the Essential Services Commission. I would like to start today's forum by acknowledging the traditional owners of all the lands we're meeting on today. For me, that's the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and I also acknowledge the traditional owners of the various lands you are on today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples participating today. I pay my respects to elders past and present and acknowledge the connection that Indigenous Australians hold to country and culture. Before we get into the session today, I'd just like to make some introductions and draw your attention to some important housekeeping. Please be aware we are recording this forum for publishing on our website. This recording will capture all the comments and questions from attendees, including those in the Q&A function as well. We are very much looking forward to facilitating a dedicated question and answer session as part of today's forum. But of course, if you've got any questions or comments that pop up during the speaker presentations, please feel free to type them into the Q&A box so that we can respond. Can I please just ask everyone to keep your microphone muted when you're not speaking to avoid feedback and background noise? And we also remind business representatives attending this forum of their obligations under Australian competition law, and note that there must be no discussion or comments, including in the Q&A, pertaining to market offer price changes during this session. I would like just to take a moment to introduce senior leaders and Commission staff in attendance today. But on behalf of all of my fellow commissioners, I would like to emphasise how pleased we are to be here today to hear directly from stakeholders. I'm joined by Marcus Crudden, our Executive Director of Price Monitoring Regulation, and Dean Wickerton, who heads up our water and our Victorian Default Offer teams, who will lead today's presentation on the draft decision. Marcus and Dean are supported today by the Victorian Default Offer project team, led by Acting Project Manager Meg Harris. We are all supporting the forum today because the Commission values frank and transparent engagement with all of our stakeholders to help inform our decision making. And on that note, I would also like to welcome our guest presenters. Thank you very much to Stephanie Tonkin from Consumer Action Law Centre. Hi, Steph. And Joe De Silva from the Australian Energy Council. How are you going, Joe? Hope you're with us as well, for joining us today. I look forward to your presentations, hearing your insights and views on the Victorian Default draft decision during the discussion today. All right. I understand we have close to, I think, 60 attendees here today. I can hear some people still coming in from the lobby. And what we've got in terms of attendance today is a spread of consumers, representatives from energy businesses, peak and industry bodies, embedded network services, and the community and consumer advocate sector. I'd also like to acknowledge and understand and note that there are members of the media in attendance at today's forum as well. We also have observers joining us from different levels and departments within government, as well as other regulators, including the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action, the Australian Energy Regulator as well. I'd like to warmly welcome all of you today and encourage everyone to participate in the discussion. We're really here to listen to you today and the views you might have on our draft decision, and we really value your views, comments, queries as they relate to this important decision, and your feedback really forms a critical part of our decision-making process. As well as your participation today, I'd also encourage you to make written submissions to us by the 19th of April, and submissions can be made via the Engage Victoria platform. Just a little bit about today's agenda. Today, Dean Wickenton from the Commission will take you through our draft decision. Then we will hear from our guest speakers, Stephanie and then Joe. After those presentations, we will move into our question and answer session at around 11:20 this morning before wrapping up around noon. The Q&A session will be hosted by Marcus Crudden from the Commission, and I'll hand over shortly to Dean to give an overview of the draft decision. But first, I really wanted to speak to you about consumer impacts, energy consumer rights and protections, and the Commission's focus on making sure customers are aware of and getting access to available support. The Commission really understands the ongoing impact of the proposed prices for Victorian Default Offer customers following last year's increase and amid current broader cost of living concerns. And we know that through our own direct engagement with representatives from both the energy and consumer sectors, many of who are on the call today, and also through our work with local and state governments. And as I've said before, upholding the rights and protections of energy consumers really remains front of mind for the Commission, as the impacts of those high wholesale energy market prices continue to flow through to retail markets and consumer energy bills. Helping consumers to navigate the energy market is a key compliance and enforcement priority for the Commission, and we will continue to remind all energy customers of their entitlements to support and assistance under Victoria's strong consumer protection framework. And we know through our own data that there may be substantial savings for consumers if they move to their retailer's best offer, and we will continue to closely monitor how businesses are meeting their responsibilities to inform energy consumers about that option. We do encourage Victorian consumers to log on to the Victorian Energy Compare website, compare.energy.vic.gov.au, to find out how much they can save by moving to another retailer. And we also know that retailers play a really important role in helping consumers understand what payment plans, concessions, rebates or utility relief grants they might be eligible for, and they can also provide practical help to support customers to reduce their energy usage and bills. A few notes on retailer obligations and compliance. We will continue to use our full suite of regulatory tools to support and promote energy retailer compliance with critical safeguards in place to protect Victorian energy consumers. We will continue to focus on retailer obligations under the Energy Payment Difficulty Framework to provide assistance to customers experiencing bill stress. And we will be encouraging consumers that are having trouble paying their bills to reach out to their energy retailer to ask about payment plans, what concessions, rebates or utility relief grants might be available. We absolutely want to make sure Victorian energy consumers are getting all the assistance they're entitled to, and we won't hesitate to take action if we see businesses not meeting their obligations. Now, market offers made by retailers to consumers are a matter for individual businesses. It is inappropriate to justify changes in market offers because the Commission proposes any changes to the levels of the Victorian Default Offer, and we will be closely monitoring how the proposed and final decisions on the Victorian Default Offer for 24-25 are communicated to customers, and if it is used to justify changes in market offers to customers as well. That's enough for me for an introduction. I'm now going to hand over to Dean to present our draft decision, and I very much look forward to observing the discussion today. Thanks very much, Dean.
Thanks, Kate. Morning, everyone. Again, thank you for coming along today. I'll give a bit of an overview of the key takeouts from the Victorian Default Offer that we're proposing to start from 1 July. So next slide, thanks. We review the Victorian Default Offer prices each year, and when we're doing that, we take into account a number of cost items. So there's wholesale and network costs, which together make up about 2/3 of the VDO price, if you like. So they're the sort of key things that swing the VDO on a year-to-year basis. The retail costs faced by energy retail businesses, so that picks up their costs of call centres and things like that, and the retail margin, environmental costs, and things like the GST as well get added on top of that. In a nutshell, the draft decision ends up in a proposed reduction to the default offer of around $112 for a typical or average domestic customer, or that's about 6.4%. And the key reason for that has been the reduction that we've seen in wholesale costs. So we use futures contracts to estimate our wholesale cost benchmarks, and they've come off. I've got a slide on that coming up shortly. They've gone down 22% compared to the decision that's in place now, so the current VDO. So that's driven a reduction in our benchmark price overall. That's been offset a bit by increases in other costs like network and retail operating costs, and I'll touch on those shortly. We do, in terms of the draft decision, it is based on fundamentally the same process methodology that we've used last year, and generally over time we've just stuck to that methodology. We've made some tweaks, changes here and there, but fundamentally the methodology we used to estimate the VDO stayed the same, and we think that has helped in terms of consistency in what we're doing and trust in the VDO. Just in terms of, before I move on, just some of the other costs, networks up about 6% and retail operating costs up about 8%. So there's some of the key factors sort of influencing the decision. Next slide, thanks. So I've already mentioned for domestic customers down $112 or thereabouts. For small businesses using 10,000 kilowatt hours, it's a year it's down $266, which is a bit more, I think, than the retail customers in percentage terms. Thanks. Next slide. The way we calculate the VDO, we do different prices for each network zone in Victoria, and there's 5 of those, and the outcomes do vary. This chart you've got in front of you here breaks down the Victorian default offer by network zone for a domestic customer. So at the right hand side there you've got the change of 6.4%. By network they range from -4% for Gemina and up to almost 8% off in the United Energy Zone. And that largely reflects the differences in the network tariffs we've used in our draft decision. Thank you. Next slide. This chart here, it's in our final decision. This gives you a sort of visual representation of what the movements in the VDO. And I won't spend too long on this, but you can just see the market reduction in the wholesale cost element in there, which is the main reason for the reduction in the domestic Victorian default offer that we've proposed in our draft. Next slide, thanks, Cynthia. And this is again for a typical small business, again just the wholesale costs coming through there are the main things. Next slide. Just in terms of some of the key cost components, so as I've already mentioned, the main reason for the reduction in the default offer is that the futures contracts that we use to measure prices have come down. And when we calculate the VDO and looking at wholesale costs, we use a 12-month averaging period of these contract prices. And that chart you've got in front of you there is the base swaps that we look at, which are a key part of the estimates that we come up with. You can see the sort of orange line there. That's the time period over which we measured the prices for our current default offer, which is in place now. You sort of saw those spike ups in late 2022. So they were driving a lot of the outcomes we saw last year. Roll forward basically 12 months, our reading for the draft decision that we put out went up to mid to late January. Those peaks have dropped out and we're measuring these lower prices now coming through. So as we move to our final decision, we'll update our estimates again to take into account what's happening with these contract prices. So you'll see sort of around April-ish there in 2003, there's a bit of an uptick there. Those ones some of those ones will drop out and replaced by the numbers that more recently have been lower, sort of coming through, and so that'll be factored into our final decision. Also, the other key component of our wholesale cost estimates is the load, and our methodology does pick up changes in load profile over time for residential and small business customers. We take a 3-year moving average of data source from smart meters in Victoria, so that gives us like a net consumption amount that we've rolled through into the VDO. Next slide, thanks. Network costs. Again, I said earlier, this is another key driver of the Victorian Default Offer. This year, we've used indicative network tariffs for 24-25 that the network businesses provided to the Australian Energy Regulator in February. Now they're indicative tariffs and they need to go through the formal process. We've used those because, and the AER has done that as well, because we think they're the current best estimates of those costs. So hopefully, well, we do have better information to ensure they're more accurate for our final decision. In the past, we've either used the existing tariffs that are applying, or last year we tacked on inflation to those as well. So I think that's a good change for us. We'll update the final decision to reflect the AER's approval of those tariffs in May, and they'll come through there. So networks is basically just a straight pass-through of tariffs. Modest costs for customer acquisition and retention. So the pricing order requires the Commission to include modest costs of customer acquisition and retention. Our approach in the draft decision is unchanged on the current approach. I think it's about 3% of costs overall, and we updated that for inflation, which added a bit more than $1 to the VDO price. Next slide. Thanks, Cynthia. I think in terms of, we did get submissions on the role of customer acquisition retention costs in the VDO. And I think in that context, it's important to note that the benchmark, the VDO, plays multiple roles. So it enables comparisons in the competitive market and also operates as a cap for embedded networks. And it is also generally available to any customer that wants to go on the VDO. So our position is that an efficient price benchmark that's broadly available and used as a comparator price should include an amount for these costs. Now, we include modest costs, so not actual costs by retailers, and our data over time shows that we are allowing amounts that are below those costs faced by retailers. And a recent review of our approach to the VDO generally found that we were balancing customer or competing interests well in our approach. The retail operating margin, so it's unchanged in our draft decision on the current rate, 5.3%. In looking at the margin, we do look at what other regulators are doing in that space, and 5.3% isn't out of step with what's happening with other regulators. Is indeed lower than some. So we've cross-checked other regulators, and also we're interested in the actual returns approach estimated by the ICRC, our colleagues in the ACT. And again, our margin fits within the most recent estimates of that sort of research, which is good. Next slide, thanks, Cynthia. They're probably the key highlights from the draft decision. We've gone through a process so far. We issued a request for comment paper late last year, took submissions on that, which informed our draft. We thank people for making submissions, taking the time to contribute. All those views are considered. The draft decision was obviously released almost a couple of weeks ago, a week and a half ago, and we're here today. I mean, submissions are open for basically a month, the next 4 weeks or so. Close to 3 weeks, but we've opened that window for a total month so people can get some good comments back to us that we can incorporate and consider for a final decision that will come through by the determination will be made by the 24th of May, and new prices will be in effect by the 1st of July this year. Okay, that's all from me for now. And I think we're on to the next slide. Thanks, Cynthia. And we're, as Kate mentioned earlier, it's good to have Steph Tonkin here from the Consumer Action Law Centre. And thanks for coming along, Steph, and taking the time to contribute today, and look forward to your overview.
Thanks very much for having me. It's great to be here again to present the VDO forum. I'm Stephanie, I'm the CEO of Consumer Action Law Centre. And look, a little bit about Consumer Action, for those who don't know us. We're an independent, not-for-profit consumer organisation. We specialise in consumer law and policy, and we work for a just marketplace where people have power and business plays fair. So Consumer Action is the main provider of the National Debt Helpline service in Victoria. And from our frontline services, we respond to over 20,000 contacts a year from people in financial difficulty. Our observations, insights and policy work are all informed by the immediate issues arising through our financial counselling and also our legal frontline services. So just speaking generally about the VDO, Consumer Action has long supported the overall objective of the VDO in providing a simple and trusted and reasonably priced electricity option that safeguards consumers unwilling or unable to engage in the retail market. And we see the VDO as continuing to provide that safety net for consumers, and in particular those who we speak to who are struggling to make ends meet. It's welcoming to see the draft decision of a reduced VDO by 6.4%. That is really good news and welcome relief for the people we're speaking to every day. But we need to keep this in the context of last year's substantial increase of 25%. Last year, we saw a spike in people presenting to our frontline services, particularly with needing help with energy hardship as a result of price increases. And that's for both people on the VDO and mostly those on market offers. And energy hardship is just one of a mix of price increases that ordinary Australians are weathering at the moment. As the cost of living crisis does continue to affect more and more Victorians' ability to meet their essential needs, we see extreme weather continue to increase, access to affordable energy supply is growing in importance. So last year, on our National Debt Helpline service, we saw an increase of general contacts by 25%. That was last financial year. And again, this year, our figures are well up in the double figures percent again increase on that last year. So we're extremely busy and people are doing it tough. Additionally, those callers requiring assistance with energy hardship grew by 12% last year as compared to 10% the previous year. In the last year, we've seen significant increase in calls from Victorians who are in employment. Some households have single, some households have double or both incomes coming in. So it's a changing face of hardship in our state. And so the number of callers who received a Centrelink income in financial difficulty, that's sort of been the bread and butter of the National Debt Helpline, and that those figures have remained relatively constant. But where the spike has occurred is in people in employment with incomes who just cannot meet all of those prices going up. And so for the first time ever, we've seen on the National Debt Helpline last year, mortgage arrears presenting as a top presenting issue. Energy's always sort of been around the third, fourth issue. But I can guarantee that almost every one of those people who are in mortgage stress have a complex mix of other debts and hardships sitting beneath that mortgage stress, of which energy and electricity hardship is one. So with the increased issues people are facing, both increasing amounts of debt and also we're seeing other problems like retailers not providing adequate or consistent assistance through the payment difficulty framework. We are concerned that we're in this this time of incredible pressure on people and surely on retailers as well to keep up with the cost of living crisis and all that flows down into the businesses. So we are seeing an increase in callers telling us that their retailer hasn't assisted them to apply for the utility relief grant. Or in some cases, people are reporting to us they felt coerced to agree to an unaffordable, unsustainable payment plan to pay out their arrears without any additional assistance. So most significantly, in the past year, 18% of energy debts that we saw on the National Debt Helpline were over $3,000. That's compared to 12% in the previous year. So similarly to the previous year, energy debt has continued to rise, with the average energy debt in 2023 being $2,600. So when you put that in view of the utility relief grants available to consumers when they are made available, it's not touching the side. Consumer Action found 52% of callers had an average energy debt of over $2,200, more than 220% of callers' average fortnightly income. And while Victorian energy relief schemes provide crucial assistance, they're not keeping up with the growing debt, as I mentioned. Without additional measures to ensure affordable energy prices, Victorian consumers will fall into further and dangerous levels of debt and all that comes with it. I did also want to make a point about people languishing on poor market offers. We are speaking to people who are working one or multiple jobs. They have a lot of balls in the air. And like I described, they may present to us with mortgage stress, but they have a whole range of issues, both financial, psychosocial, family, a whole range of issues that people are grappling with at this time. And sometimes people are grappling with these issues for the first time. With all those balls in the air, it can be very difficult for a consumer to navigate through to find the best deal. Some people just don't have the bandwidth, the mental energy, or the skills or confidence to be able to navigate onto a better deal. And so that is what we are seeing in our casework, is people could be getting much better deals. And I do encourage the retailers in the room here today to think about how you might be more proactive in encouraging people, particularly those in your hardship programs, to find themselves onto the best offer, including if that is the VDO. Specifically, with the decision on wholesale costs, we note it's welcoming to see reduction in wholesale costs this year, as wholesale prices remain a core aspect of the default offer price. With this in mind, while the reduction in the overall VDO is welcome, the recent spikes over the past few years demonstrate the current market isn't stable. It's not providing stability consumers need for the cost of something as essential as energy. So we continue to be of the view that the ESC must investigate how it incorporates a wider range of risk management strategies available to retailers in wholesale cost estimates to ensure that they do reflect truly efficient costs. So that might be a mix of products. It doesn't mean a retailer can't access cheaper energy because of their structure. So we're talking about a whole range of risks there. Retail operating margin, notably, increases were found in the retail operating cost and retail margin. With reference to our submission that we made to the process earlier, we welcomed the ESC's invitation to provide suggestions on alternative approaches to setting the retail margin. And notably, Victoria's margin has been at the top of the range in recent years. This, alongside the downward trend of average retail margin evidenced in the ACCC's 2022 report, Consumer Action has recommended ESC Commission's bottom-up modelling to quantify an efficient retail margin. And finally, on the CARC, as part of the retail operating costs, and I note Dean's comments earlier about the orders requiring taking into account some level of cost for retailers to advertise and retain customers as a proportion of the cost stack. The VDO need not be, it could be marketed and possibly should be marketed, but it's arguably advertising and retention programs arguably are not relevant for customers receiving the VDO. They're by definition not receiving a market offer and therefore, in our view, shouldn't bear the associated costs. In closing, the draft decision of the reduced VDO for the coming financial year is a really positive step. We hope it will reduce the financial burden of Victorians receiving the VDO. We hope it also does serve to bring down or reflect a reduction in market offers as well for the very many Victorians struggling to afford their bills. More and more households are struggling, and I hope I've painted that picture. We're seeing energy debt rise and people choosing between literally putting food on the table, which as well costs more, and keeping their lights on. We reaffirm Consumer Action's long-standing support for the VDO and its intention to provide simple, trusted and reasonable prices for Victorians. We hope with this recent drafted reduction, further focus can be made across the sector to making sure Victorians are provided information to access a better offer, and improvements in the size, the scope and automatic application of concessions can also be used to start to deal with the growing problem of energy debt. I'll leave it there. Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you, Steph. Thanks for your presentation today. Much appreciated, and thanks for your time. And we might have some Q&A later on. We'll see you soon. I'd like to now introduce Joe Da Silva from the Australian Energy Council. Over to you, Joe, for your session. We'll get the slides up. They're ready to go. Good morning.
Thank you, Dean.
Over to you.
Good morning, and thank you for having me today. Look, this initial slide is really just an intro into what I'll be talking about, which I'm sure is no surprise to any of you. So on to the next slide. This is a little bit about the Australian Energy Council, just to provide you with an overview of what we do. So we're the peak body for electricity and downstream natural gas businesses operating in the competitive wholesale and retail energy markets. Our members generate and sell energy to over 10 million homes and businesses, and they're major investors in renewable energy generation. The AEC supports reaching net zero by 2050, as well as a 55% emissions reduction target by 2035. And the AEC is committed to delivering the energy transition for the benefit of consumers. So on to the next slide, please. So this is a slide of Victorian Energy Compare, which I'm sure is not unfamiliar to you. And the reason I'm actually highlighting this is that the AEC believes the Commission's draft decision on regulated power prices should act as an important reminder for households and businesses to shop around for better electricity deals. So customers who are looking to save money shouldn't wait for the new Victorian Default Order to come into effect on 1 July. So they should check online or ring their retailer because there are more competitive deals available. So it's quick and easy to find and switch to a cheaper market offer today using Victorian Energy Compare, which is indicated on this slide. Retailers also inform customers every 3 months if they are on their best deal and how much they can save by switching. But because of the need for informed consent, they cannot automatically move customers to a different deal. So for that reason, it really does pay to check the competitive market. So the regulated prices are designed to be a safety net for the 13% of Victorians who are on the VDO. While they are not the cheapest deals in the market, the risk with default prices is that many people think they are the best option. That's why it's really important for us to encourage people to shop around. Next slide, please. So this slide shows retail margins over a fairly extensive period. And it shows that at the moment, in 2021-22, retail margins had declined to being the lowest on record. And what it highlights is that retailers have been competing in a highly volatile and challenging environment. So while we understand the balance the ESC needs to find when setting the VDO price, between protecting customers from unreasonably high prices and ensuring investors are compensated for the capital they provide retailers. We consider that in recent years, the retail market is becoming increasingly unattractive as a site for equity investment. Next slide, please. So we note the record levels of retailer of last resort events since May 2022. So since that time, there have been 11 retailers that have exited the market. And as this quote shows, and as noted by the Australian Energy Regulator, the market remains vulnerable to supply or demand shocks. So I won't read out the quote, but you have it there to review. So the AEC believes that it's important for the Commission to ensure that the VDO 24/25 adequately supports the retail market investing environment. Next slide, please. So we've heard a lot today about cost of living issues, and we all understand that these are very pressing for customers at the moment. However, it's good to contextualise the role of different actors in the system. So the role of the regulator is to set a determined price in line with the VDO objectives. And retailers have programs in place to support customers in payment difficulty. Then there are other community-based government support mechanisms, such as energy bill relief. To the extent that support is required beyond these, that's when it's the role of government to step in. It's not the role of the regulator to adjust its assessment based on a view of affordability. Next slide, please. Household energy bills are made up of several different components, with costs varying from state to state, dependent on things like the types of generation sources, the market size, the network area, and the state-based green schemes. Bills will also vary dependent on the retailer and the energy plan which is chosen. To understand energy power bills, it's important to understand what goes into them. Broadly speaking, there are 4 types of costs, and these pie charts illustrate the different costs. So you've got wholesale costs, network costs, retail costs. Here they're treated separately as retail and other and the retail margin, and then also environmental costs. So around 80% of a customer's power bill is made up of the costs of generation and the costs of the poles and wires, which retailers then pass on to the customer. So these 2 components, wholesale and network, are major factors in determining final prices. Other costs include government environmental schemes, retail operating costs, and the retail operating margin. As we've heard today, the draft VDO decision expects household prices to be 6.4% lower on average from 1 July. The latest decision reflects a moderation in the costs of generating electricity, which are the wholesale costs, offset partly by increasing network costs for the poles and wires used to deliver electricity. The widely anticipated trend for the future is that network costs will increase over the coming years to pay for the transmission investment which is planned and underway. The challenge will be how to deal with affordability in that context, where you have increasing network prices, which are a large part of the bill. And I put to you that a focus on retail can only be a short-term solution. The retail part of the bill is around 10 to 12%. So it's a very small part of the bill if you're trying to keep a lid on prices. Next slide, please. So to turn to some specifics about the draft determination, the Australian Energy Council welcomes the relative stability of the Commission's methodology, as it really does help retailers with their forward planning. In our planned submission to the draft determination, we intend to deep dive into some aspects of the draft decision. And I've got on this slide some of the areas where we expect to explore in further detail. So in our submission to the ESC's request for comment paper, we raise concerns about how load shape is affected by unaccounted for energy in the wholesale cost benchmark. As noted by the ESC, the Australian Energy Market Operator measures the amount of energy that goes into the national electricity market and then the amount that reaches consumers' meters. Unaccounted for energy is the difference between these two amounts. Since global settlement began in 2022, the Australian Energy Market Operator has charged all retailers for their share of unaccounted for energy. We welcome the ESC's willingness to consider submissions on this issue. So we support the Origin Energy submission that in the event network prices approved by the Australian Energy Regulator are not available to incorporate into the VDO pricing determination, the Commission should use the 2024-25 network tariffs submitted for approval by the Victorian networks as the next best alternative. We agree that any differences between the proposed and approved network tariffs should be accounted for by applying a true-up mechanism in future years. Next, on to the retail operating margin. We do not support the decision made by the Commission to reduce the retail operating margin from 5.7 to 5.3% between the 2023-24 VDO draft and final decisions. We note a couple of comments in relation to this. Firstly, the record low margins under which retailers are operating. There is a real question as to what sort of market outcome the ESC is targeting in terms of an adequate environment for retail market investment. With respect to the other regulators that the ESC compares against, the AEC does not believe they are comparable market environments. And while some new retailers have sought to enter the market in 2022 and 23, there's been a higher proportion of exits and the entries have significantly declined since mid-2022. The AEC therefore proposes that the retail operating margin be set at 5.7% for VDO 2024-25. Next slide, please. So we believe Victorian Energy Upgrade Scheme costs are underestimated in the draft decision. An input of $77 for Victorian Energy Efficiency Certificates, otherwise known as VECs, is well under the current market price, as shown by this slide. The Commission has used a trade-weighted 12-month estimate up to 31st of December 2023, so of course this must be refreshed, and it's not clear how the Commission accounts for retailers who are paying the penalty of $95 because of the current problems with the administration of the scheme. VEC costs have steadily trended upwards since 2020, when certificates were around $30 compared to the current price of $96. The main drivers of VEC costs are constraints on creation of activities. The primary activity under the VEU was lighting installations, which comprised around 80% of registrations in 2021. Government reforms have seen lighting activity phased out and not yet replaced by other activity. Many new activities are more administratively burdensome, resulting in slower certificate creation. Other contributions are annual increases to demand. There are enshrined certificate targets in legislation that increase each year, despite the supply issues above. Inefficient price signals also drive VEEC costs. Due to the high spot price, some accredited parties are defaulting on forward contracts and have been unwilling to enter into new forward contracts. The department has said previously that there is enough supply to meet annual demand. While true, it does not provide liquidity or an ability for retailers to hedge or smooth costs, which is a primary retail function. So in summary, I'd like to thank the Commission for inviting me to present today, and I'd like to provide special thanks to Dean Wickerton and Jonathan Roberts for their willingness to engage in the lead up to the decision. Thank you.
Thank you all. We'd like to turn to the question and answer part of the forum now. So use the QA questions in the chat box on the side. Can you mute your microphone when you're not speaking? These will be recorded. Also ask, given organisation affiliations aren't showing up in the attendees list, if you do ask a question, could you just identify what organisation you are with in asking that question as well? That'll help us when we take notes after the event about who asked what and if there's any follow-up items we need to get back to people on. Meg, do you have any questions in yet? Or I think there was a couple of questions might have come in even pre-forum. So is there something you want to kind of raise to be an icebreaker and get some discussion going?
Thanks, Marcus. Yeah, thanks everyone. So we haven't received anything in the Q&A function as yet, but please do post it in there if you have a question. We did get one ahead of the forum, and it's probably a question for you, Marcus. It is actually regarding the recent increase in the Victorian Energy Efficiency Certificate prices, and I guess just how that's accounted for in the video overall.
In the video overall, as perhaps Jo even hinted in her presentation, that the current prices are based on December. We'll take a read on where the prices are just before we make that final decision. So it'll be a sort of mid-April type read, and that will be reflected in there. So any rises between December and now will go into that consideration. I think overall, the VEU certificates make up just over $45 in that $1,640 price, so they're just under 3% of the market. Environmental costs themselves make up 8% of the VDO price, so there are a meaningful component, but equally changes in it are not going to result in dramatic increases between draft and final, but we will reflect increases in market amounts, and any of those market orientated prices, the wholesale prices, etc., are all updated with the read date fairly close to that final decision. So just like the environmental costs, any further falls in the wholesale markets, and there has been a strong downward trend in them compared to this time last year, will be reflected through. I'm not sure, Jo, if you have anything further to add on that, or...
No, look, I think, this is an area that, it's a broader concern than just the VDO decision for our members. The access to certificates has been really challenged, and obviously they're at that very high rate, the $96. So it's an ongoing area for our members.
And certainly the Commission is willing to engage on those issues, both as part of the VDO, but also as part of our VEU work, and we'll continue to work with the AEC and participants in the VU scheme on these issues. We are aware of them, and we certainly are willing to listen and also liaise with the policymakers on these type of issues.
Thanks, Marcus.
Have we got any other questions come in yet, Meg?
No, nothing as yet. Thanks, Marcus.
This is very subdued compared to last year, which is actually quite good. But if anyone does have any further questions, either for myself or Dean on behalf of the Commission, or anyone wants to ask Steph or Joe any questions as well, please feel free to. Otherwise, we might have a very short forum.
Marcus, there was just a question we had perhaps for Stephanie, maybe just if you had any observations or recommendations to better support customers, perhaps that you're observing in other industries that you could see some benefit in the electricity space.
Sure. Look, I think energy and the Essential Services Commission and energy retailers do a good job. I mean, I think I've been quoted a lot saying that telco providers could learn a lot from what some of our energy retailers in Victoria do. But I think a couple of things that I called out in my remarks earlier were more about how can we make things like concessions apply automatically rather than, putting a burden on retailers to have to identify when a customer might be eligible and walk them through the process and tick all those boxes. So I think concessions is one area where we need to look at, and as well the size and targeting of those concessions, which is a matter for government. Really needs an overhaul because, like I said, the amounts aren't going up and it's not touching the sides compared to the level of energy debt that we're seeing. Another thing, I guess, that we're not seeing a lot of that we do see, say, in financial services, and obviously the markets are very different, but we do see a lot of debt waivers in financial services. Particularly when people have multiple complex issues or they're trying to, escape or move on from a really difficult period of time for whatever reason. And we're not always seeing those same levels of debt waiver in the energy space like we do in, say, financial services. So that's another one. And the third remark I made was around people languishing on poor offers where they could be doing a lot better. And I note Joe's comments about how easy it is to compare. And I mean, yes, for the majority, that's probably true for people who have capacity, time and energy to do that. And it is important. And yeah, of course, we encourage people to do that too. But there are people who, through having poor experiences previously, are not confident to engage with comparison websites and with, negotiating or finding a better deal. Even though, I note the requirements and we're trying to push for this in the telco space as well to be able to present better offers. I think that's a really good thing, but still people aren't able to take those up. So I do, like I said, encourage retailers to be more proactive in the space of you could be on a much better deal. And while we're talking about electricity here, that has to be said for gas as well. We're seeing an increase in gas hardship on our or people being unable to afford the real spike in gas. And without transparency in a VDO, I can't see how that's going to come down as well. So I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, Steph. Perhaps just a question for Joe of my own off the cuff. You mentioned volatility in wholesale markets. I guess what we're seeing at the moment, those things that are looking a lot more settled. I guess Steph also mentioned the volatility at the moment, and there is a volatility allowance built into that wholesale market. The price that we set. Is there anything you're seeing from your members that are raising concerns about volatility in the near term, or is it more this issue about with the transition over time, we're likely to see more volatility in the market as we see sort of coal and get coal plants exiting? You did mention the extra expenditure. So you're saying something that's a concern the next 3 months anymore, is it a 3 to 5 year horizon type thing as these transmission pressures come into prices?
Yeah, look, I think the issue of volatility is very front and centre of retailers' minds, is something that they have to, increasingly manage and navigate. I guess the indications we're getting is that the market of the future is likely to be even more volatile than what we're seeing today. So I suppose if you don't mind me asking you a question, my question is for the Commission, what do you see in terms of volatility? Do you think it'll be more or less volatile as the years go by?
I think in general direction, the advice we get is that it may be more volatile or more subject potentially for external shocks. That doesn't necessarily mean we probably may not, or hopefully don't have an event as severe as 18 months ago, which really I think no one was foreseeing an event of that magnitude. But I guess we're seeing a more complex energy market as we see energy transitions. I guess also as we see withdrawal of coal plants and even the increased unreliability of coal, and as we saw a month ago, the potential for more frequent or more severe storm type events, and that can have short-term impacts. Our energy market modelling expert, I see Andrew Harper is here. Andrew, do you want to put any general comments you have as someone that specialises in managing wholesale energy markets forward looking? And it is something we do build into these models of volatility allowance as well. But Andrew, do you want to have a comment on a general perspective, what you see as a sort of wholesale energy market modelling expert?
Yeah, sure, Marcus. Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me. Good. Yes, look, I'd agree. I mean, I think we're expecting that we will see wholesale markets and likely green markets being more volatile in future. I think in particular, I guess one of the things we've seen driving volatility in the past is retirements of coal-fired power stations, and that's going to continue over the next decade. And potentially with each one that retires, the risk of volatility following the next one retiring increases. At the same time, I guess I would say that the work we've done so far suggests that the sort of products available to retailers to manage that volatility are still doing their job. So retailers are still able to manage their volatility in the short term. So I guess it seems to us that the retailers themselves are still able to sort of effectively manage risk, but that will still mean that assuming the current approach of effectively passing through these wholesale costs into the VDO remains, that customers will be likely exposed to volatility. So there may be times when prices are falling, but we'd also expect to see times when prices are rising under the existing approach.
Yeah, look, thank you. It is an ongoing discussion within our membership. It is something we're examining very closely. We are still developing our response to the Commission's draft determination. So, this is certainly part of our considerations.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Andrew. And yes, these are matters we are, and a number of your members were subject to information requests, so we can understand the sort of hedging strategies and hedging products being used out there, and we'll continue to keep a monitoring on that in this video, but future videos. I think, Steph, you pointed that as well about how risks are managed by retailers on behalf, and I guess retailers do play an important role in providing stability to end-use customers, so we do recognise that. So I think we've got any questions. So last chance, put out there if anyone has got a question they want to raise. I think Damien Sullivan, you've put up your hand, so thanks for that, Damien.
Thanks, Marcus. I didn't want to leave you hanging there. Damien Sullivan, Brotherhood of St. Lawrence. I just want to echo just the importance of the reduction in the VDO, the proposed reduction in the price for the people that we work with at the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence, and that having the default offer as tight as possible and as low as possible is really important. And that's evidenced through the growing payment difficulty numbers we see through the ESC's report, and also the hidden hardship, the people we hear about who are not using energy, who don't show up in payment difficulty numbers, but who don't use energy that they need for their health and well-being because of the tight circumstances they're in relation to costs of living pressures and energy prices. And we do all of it, the organisations like ours hear of people who are going to bed early to save on winter heating bills or showering in swimming pools and the like. There's a whole lot of problems going on. And the VDO is just a really important safety net for those people. It's not perfect, but it's an important safety net. And I think I would just raise questions about the switching is very important, but we certainly see that a lot of people we work with aren't active in the market. So we recently, with partners, surveyed 1,200 people we've worked with recently. Over 60% haven't switched for more than 2 years. Like, the numbers of people who aren't active in the market is very high, and many of those people rely on the VDO or the role it plays in the market. And I'd also just raise it, I think it's important to balance that a number of the retailers, many of the retailers are doing very well in terms of the returns for investors, including in the retail space. And yeah, just to the critical importance for the people we work with at the coalface and how difficult they are finding it. So it's more of a comment than a question, but just to put it out there.
No, thanks, Damien. Some really important points there.
Marcus, could I just quickly respond?
Yeah, that's okay, Jo.
Not to challenge anything Damien said, but just to say that, you know, retailers do really go above and beyond their minimum regulatory requirements in supporting customers in payment difficulty, and we're always looking at what additional measures we can provide to customers. So, for example, recently we provided very significant funding towards financial counsellors to enable financial counsellors to better support customers in payment difficulty or vulnerable circumstances. And one thing, we recently had a meeting with the Commonwealth Department, and the issue of switching came up, and how easy it is for customers who are, you know, often in a state of crisis, how easy it is for them to consider things like switching. And one thing we recommended the department look into is how financial counsellors may be able to help customers in these situations when they are in hardship or in payment difficulty, to actually look at all the options available to them, including switching to better deals, because there really are significant savings to be found.
Yeah, and Jo, I would agree completely. And it wasn't meant to be a big whack on the retailers, because, as Steph said before, the retailers are doing a lot of great work, but we also see a very important role for a really tight VDO as well.
Yeah.
I might just, if you don't mind, Marcus, just add in financial counsellors in Victoria in particular are incredibly busy. We have agencies across the state closing their books. We have 10-week waits for people to get into financial counselling. So on the National Debt Helpline that we operate, 80% of calls here in Victoria, we're doing as much as we can by providing sessions over the phone, providing repeat sessions. But if you think of what the picture I'm trying to paint is, energy is an essential service and it's critical, but energy hardship is one of a long list of problems that people have. So financial counsellors can provide support to people to navigate through better deals, but they'd be doing that with their energy, gas, telco, all of the many credit accounts that people have, their home loans. it's not realistic as well. So financial counsellors are amazing, and we have a team of them who save people's lives quite literally. But you know, we have to work together with industry. It can't just all be pushing down onto a sector that is grossly unfunded, though noting it's excellent that retailers are putting funding into the sector, but we are grossly unfunded. We are in incredible demand in a cost of living crisis, and like I described, the face of hardship has changed. It's much more mainstream than any of us would expect.
Yeah, I agree with you, Steph, and that's really why retailers put a significant amount of funding to help meet that unmet demand. You know, that's really what that additional funding was about, and you know, it's quite a significant investment for retailers over a number of years. So.
Thanks for that. And Jamie, we probably wouldn't mind following up on that data about switching rates and how frequently people are switched. I must admit, I was in a conversation this morning with Sarah about getting a better understanding of who is on the VDO, noting numbers did grow a lot over the last 2 years or so. Now, some of that was the volatility. It's also been, I guess, people exiting market contracts and being on it. But, you know, at this time last year, there wasn't much discounting and prices were clustering. We're seeing that the better offers re-emerging. I think it's nothing why we, in releasing this, I think Joe and also the AER in releasing theirs are all pointing to, you know, discounts are re-emerging after that very tight period. There's probably people on the video that don't need to be on it, recognising, you know, I think they've got 360,000 at the moment. It was 400,000 last year. I think historically it was more about 250,000. So we have had that sort of growth of probably 100,000 people on it. So it would be really good to get a good understanding of who's on the VDO and also what can be done to get it. The other thing, I think, Steph, you talked about other non-pricing methods. We do know, and it's probably a challenge for retailers out there, how we get people such as, you know, we still see high amounts of people not claiming things like concessions. So, you know, we're here talking about issues that might change bills $10, but there's $300 plus available for someone that's eligible but not claiming a concession, which is a very quite material amount. So I think we'd welcome any thoughts on how are ways we can get people to take up all the things they may be eligible for. We know a lot of retailers do a lot of work. There's been very good take-ups on the utility relief grants in recent years, but matters of assisting affordability that go beyond just a price are things that interest the Commission as well. So any thoughts anyone has on that are welcome to put it in. I think non-price measures were raised in some of the submissions by Consumer Actions and VCOS last year. So I guess we're interested in hearing any thoughts. I don't think we've got any further questions, so I'll hand over to Kate shortly to wrap up, but I'll just, Steph or Joe, if you've got any closing statements you want to make, and then we'll hand over to Kate. And thank everyone for attending, and remind people you can put written submissions in by the 19th of April. So, and we're willing to have one-on-one engagements, and I do acknowledge, Joe, you're saying that Dean and Jonathan have been very willing and very engaged, and we intend to be very open to anyone. If you want to book a time with the team, please get in touch with us. But with that, Steph, any closing comment?
Yeah, look, thanks for having me. I hope I've painted a picture of it's a sad picture of how stark things really are for many people in our community. We do hope, as you can sharpen figures as time goes on, post the draft decision, we do hope to see a further reduction in the final VDO decision, particularly in light of the fact that we're coming off the back of a 25% increase last year, which was astronomical for people, as evidenced by Energy and Water Ombudsman numbers as well. And just on that, I did want to make the point that it is open to retailers to put that phone number on their bills. It may not be required here in Victoria. We've got national companies, and there is the opportunity as well, which I know a lot of consumers we speak to don't know of EWOF or that opportunity. So that's a final little point in there. But again, just encourage retailers, you know, your customers are doing it tough. to be proactive with them as much as you can and really try to work together. It's also a good retention strategy. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Steph. And Jo, do you have any closing comments on
Yeah,
behalf of your
look,
members?
Thanks, Marcus. First of all, I just want to say that we do really welcome the relative stability of the ESC's methodology. You know, like it's really great that the Commission has a methodology which is very clear. It's very clear how the various components are determined, and there's quite a lot of transparency. So we do value that, and that really helps in terms of managing these businesses. I guess, you know, as I mentioned when I presented the pie chart of the price stack, you know, the retail component of the bill is quite a small component of the bill. And I think there's really a very big question for a number of parties coming up as to how the rising network costs are going to be managed in the future. You know, really, it's not a case of trying to, you know, sort of, you know, not be responsible for the retail component of the bill. It's really saying we've got this looming issue for everybody, which will deeply affect customers. And, you know, what will be done to support, you know, the types of customers that Steph has been talking about, and Damien, what's going to be done to support them as these network prices continue to increase. So I think, you know, if I'm looking at a major issue for customers coming down the line, I think it's definitely what's going to happen in terms of managing those increasing network costs.
Thanks, Jo. And with that, I'll hand over to Kate to give closing remarks.
Thanks very much, Marcus, and thanks very much for the questions and the discussion we've just had. I always find it very useful just at the end of these forums just to reflect back some of the key areas, not a comprehensive list of what we've heard this morning, but what's been key and front of mind in what I've heard this morning. So just a couple of moments on that, if you just bear with me. Certainly heard from Stephanie from CAUC. Thank you, Stephanie, of the increase in Victorians reaching out for help, changing face of Victorians in hardship, including those in employment, also reaching out for financial assistance, and with energy debt from your perspective continuing to rise. Thanks also, Damien, for those further insights from the community sector on the proposed reduction on the VDO, its important role as a safety net and the urge to keep the VDO tight. CAUC recognised the positive step in the proposed reduction in the VDO, and also your hope, Stephanie, that it reflects a reduction in market offers as well, and really encouraged a consideration by us of some of the important cost inputs to the VDO, in particular CARC and ROM, some of which we hold the pen on and some of which we do not, but we will continue to engage with you and reflect on those particular aspects. Jo from the AEC, thank you very much for your presentation. Your reflections that the VDO decision should act as a reminder for Victorians to shop around for better deals, and you really encourage the Commission to ensure that the VDO adequately supports the retail market investing environment as well. Good to hear the AEC welcome the stability of the methodology applied by the Commission to the draft decision in the VDO, and you did express some interest in some key areas of feedback, including accounted for energy, Victorian network prices, which you've added a little bit more context at the end there. Thank you, Jo. Retail operating margin and Victorian energy efficiency certificates. I heard the AEC's perspective that it does not support our decision to reduce the retail operating margin and proposes it be set at 5.7% for this VDO. We'll continue to discuss and hear from all stakeholders on that retail operating margin. And you also had some discussion around environmental costs as well, Jo, and raised some concerns about VEC prices and access to VECs and the VDU program affecting retailers, the impact on the VDO, but also more broadly. So thank you for those reflections and insights this morning. It's good to hear some general perspectives on what the market might look like in the future and impact on businesses as well as consumers, and the reflection that we may continue to see the wholesale market continue to be more volatile in the future. Thank you, Andrea, for your reflections, and the fact that you continue to see the products available in the market to allow retailers to manage that volatility That's still doing the good job that it needs to do, but we do look forward to hearing further from stakeholders and including the AEC. Joe, you mentioned you'd be engaging with us further on that as well. A good discussion at the end, always important to remember the importance of consumers being on the best offer, either with their retailer or switching to a better deal. I did hear switching is important, but people are not always active in the market. I think it's always great to recognise the great work of financial counsellors and the intermediaries that help consumers. But as you said, Steph, you know, the workload is immense. But also to recognise the good work that retailers do in this space and to urge that to continue to happen to help consumers. And what I always take away from forums such as this is that we all have a common shared goal here together. How do we work together better across the regulator, industry and the community sector to promote better outcomes for Victorian energy consumers? So I was very pleased to hear that conversation and how we can do more together. They were my key reflections. The team have a very detailed set of notes and look forward to engaging further with all stakeholders as we move through the consultation period. I will also relay what we've heard today to my fellow commissioners, and I think Satish is still with us on the line as well. So we will continue to engage internally about what we've heard. My thanks to Stephanie, to Joe for your presentations and for being willing to spend the time to have that conversation with us today. Thank you very much. And thanks very much for all the Commissioner staff who put together today's session as well. Just to carry on from Marcus's points, if you haven't done so yet, really encourage you to make comments and provide a formal submission to our draft decision by the 19th of April on Engage Victoria. I think the team have got the details there on the slide. And if you do have any queries, comments or other feedback on today's session, and in relation to the draft decision on the video, please get in touch with Dean Wigginton or send the video team an email via video@esc.vic.gov.au. Thanks very much for everybody's attendance this morning. We value your time and your reflections. We'll close the session now, but take care and thanks very much again.